I was 20 years old, and I lived in Georgetown, Texas. Me and my boyfriend and two of our friends were having to get together and drinking one night. Me and my boyfriend started arguing, and I took off out of our friend's apartments and ran downstairs and ran out into the parking lot, and he chased after me, and we started fighting and arguing and yelling at each other, and to the point that the neighbors called the Georgetown Police Department for a disturbance. 3 police cop cars showed up, and Fennell was one of them. They separated me and my boyfriend. They took him to the side, and Jimmy Fennell Jr. actually is the police officer who pulled me to the side and started talking to me. And then they ended up swapping. The officers did. So Jimmy Fennell Jr. went over to my boyfriend, and the other police officer came to me. And I guess Jimmy Fennell Jr. started questioning my boyfriend of how I was intoxicated because we were underage. And he told him that, I had got drunk at my job. We didn't want to get our friends in trouble because they were of age. And he asked him what I did, and he told him that I was a dancer. So they arrested my boyfriend for public intoxication, who at the time was in the military. So they took him to the Georgetown Police Department and booked him. Well, it left me alone at the apartment complex in Georgetown with Jimmy Fennell Jr. And he, at that time, told me that they didn't arrest my boyfriend, that they had actually just taken him to a hotel room to separate us for the night so that the confrontation didn't get any worse. And I was pretty hysterical and freaking out about them taking him. So I asked, can he come back? Can you bring him back? And he told me no. And he said that, however, he would take me to him and drop me off there. So he opened the front of his police vehicle, and I got in the front, and he turned the heater on because I was cold, so it kept me warm. And we started driving. Well, at that point, I wasn't very familiar with Georgetown, Texas. I didn't live there very, very long, so I really had no clue, if we were going the wrong direction or not. And he ended up taking me to a kind of a park area. It pretty much was like a jogging place. It had a strip of cement and, trees and grass and stuff. And he asked me to get out of the vehicle. So I stepped out of the vehicle and asked him, what was going on, what we were doing, how come he wasn't taking me to the hotel. And that's when he proceeded to ask me to dance for him. And I told him no, that I wouldn't do that. And when I told him no, it made him pretty angry. So he then grabbed me and slammed me up against the back of his patrol car. And he took his belt off that has, their guns and their weapons and stuff on it. And he slowly, individually started pointing out which each thing on his belt was. And he took his gun out, and he placed it against my head. And he raped me. He had sexual intercourse with me. And I kept telling him no, and he wouldn't stop. And after he was done, he put me back into the patrol car and told me that if I ever told anybody that when he got out of prison, he would hunt me down and he would kill me. So he then gave me, this is the sick part, he then gave me his personal card and took me back to the apartments and told me that I was going to be a good girl and keep my mouth shut and that I was going to call him tomorrow. And after he went to his child's soccer game with his wife, he'd come back and pick me up. And he watched me walk all the way back up to the apartments and up the stairs and sat there in his patrol car until I banged on my friend's door. They opened it, and I went inside, and we called 911, asking for a rape kit, and told them what had happened. I went back outside, waiting for the ambulance because it was a very big apartment complex, so it could have caused confusion. And when I went back outside, I was on the phone with 911 waiting for the ambulance to show up, and Jimmy Fennell Jr. and the other fellow officer that was with him on the first call pulled into the apartment complex. So I took off running and screaming on the phone with 911, asking them how come they sent the same officer that I had just told them raped me. And dispatch was very confused, saying that they didn't dispatch any officers. They only dispatched an ambulance. I took off running. They got out of their cars and took off chasing me on foot, the officers. And I ran up some stairs, and I got cornered in pretty much. And there was no way to go back down without going through the police officers. And one of them walked up and grabbed my phone out of my hand and hung up on 911. And I was looking around. I couldn't see Jimmy Fennell anywhere. So I was very dazed, confused, because I saw him pull in. So at that point, the police officers told me that I was under arrest for public intoxication, put me back in one of their patrol cars in handcuffs, and the second I was in custody and they shut the door, Jimmy Fennell Jr. came out hiding from behind a tree. They had hit him to get me to come down the staircase. They arrested me and took me to jail before the ambulance could get there. As we were exiting the apartments, the ambulance pulled in, and Jimmy Fennell Jr. went and was talking to the ambulance. And they took me to jail and held me in a jail cell for 9 hours until some detectives showed up and got me out and took me to a hospital in another town for a rape kit.
What was his personality like during this whole thing at the park?
Very aggressive, and it was almost as if he had a grudge against me, like almost as if he knew me, like he hated me, like I had done something to make him mad. He didn't act like he definitely didn't act like it was his first time being very, mean and hurtful towards a woman. It seemed very comfortable to him. He didn't seem nervous about it. He didn't seem nervous about the surroundings. I mean, and we were in plain sight. We were in a secluded park, but plain sight. Anybody could have walked by. Anybody could have drove by and watched the whole thing go on. There was no trees covering me. There was nothing. And he was very angry, especially when I told him no. When I told him no is when it was almost like a temper came out, and that's when he grabbed me and threw me up against his patrol car very forcefully. And it made him mad, extremely mad, that I told him no.
What part of the patrol car did he throw you up against?
He threw me up the back of it on the right-hand side, not like behind it, but, kind of side of it between the door and the end of the car on the trunk, to where I was leaned up against my face down. He was holding my face down with one of his hands, and pretty much had his entire body leaned up against me to where he still had power and control but could still restrain me.
Did you feel like you were overmatched? There's no way you could fight against this? There's no way? There was between, he was a fairly, decent-sized guy, so between the body weight and the fear of what would happen, unfortunately, I didn't fight back. I had been, drinking, so there was alcohol in my system, and you'd be surprised how quick you sober up, so. And he had his gun. His belt was completely laid out in front of me on the trunk of the car, so in plain sight. And he had taken his weapon out of it and actually placed it next to my head. So between his body weight and the fear of what he would do with that gun, if I fought back, I didn't. I kept telling him no, and I was crying, and he would tell me to shut up. But it was very disturbing. It was almost like he would ask me things like,
does that feel good? Does this feel good? You know, are you going to tell me no again? Like, very controlling over the situation, as if he had to feel like he was in control.
How long did this event happen? Did it take place? How long did it last?
I honestly can't answer that. It seemed like it lasted forever to me. I know the evidence that the district attorney and everybody pulled up was that he was off of his monitor for 2 hours. Uncalled for. It seemed like a lifetime to me.
Was this unprotected, and did he finish inside of you?
It was unprotected. I honestly can't answer if he finished inside of me. They found no traces of semen inside of me in the rape kit. I don't know how he managed to pull it off, but somehow they didn't find any evidence in the rape kit of, they could tell that there was sexual penetration and that it was rough. But as far as traces of hair or semen, they did not find anything off my clothing or my body. They did find struggling marks on the back of his car and my face imprint and my hand imprint, because obviously as soon as I told them, they went and took his car from him before he could wash it. And they did find traces of my hair in the front seat. But as far as any kind of DNA or semen samples, there were none. They could not find any trace that he ever physically touched my body.
Did you get the feeling that he may have done this, that he had done this before, you said?
Yes.
And what
Absolutely.
What made you think that?
He was too comfortable in the situation. Extremely too comfortable in the situation. He knew, it was like he did a sloppy job at what he did, I think because he honestly believed I was scared enough, because he was the law, that I wouldn't say anything. But he was too comfortable, extremely too comfortable with it. He wasn't nervous. There was no paranoid. There was absolutely nothing. Like, he had no concern in the world for a man who was raping a woman in plain sight on duty. No concern in the world. No nervousness, no nothing. Just as if it is what it was. He didn't struggle. He didn't mumble words. It was almost as if he, which is impossible, but it's almost as if he would have premeditated it. He knew what to say it, how to play it out. He caught me off guard when he threw me up against his car and got me in a way to where I couldn't fight back. It had been impossible. I mean, he had me face forward on his patrol vehicle, restraining me. So there would have been no possible way, unless I was strong enough to push back, to get him off of me, to claw him, to do anything in that nature. And in my personal opinion, if that was just the first time it had happened or something like that, I don't think that it would have worked out that way. I would think there would at least be some nervousness. At least that. Especially the surroundings and the circumstances and all of that took a part in it. And there was absolutely nothing. I mean, he even took me home and dropped me off. Now, if that's your first time, why didn't he leave me there and flee? It would have taken me longer to get to help clear out there than delivering me to my house.
You had some problems with the way the Georgetown Police Department handled this case. You kind of went through it. Just generally speaking, how do you feel about how they handled this case from your perspective? I
don't think they did handle it. I think they covered their asses. It's what I think. I don't feel for one second that this was ever a concern to them. I feel that it may have been a concern for their own protection and their own dirty little secrets, but never because of what one of their officers did to a citizen. You know, like, are you serious? There was other girls who came out during the time that this was all going through. Some of them claimed that, you know, they did. He did make them have sex with them and stuff. And one of them even said that she went to Round Rock Police Department to file it. When my incident happened, they went back to trace all of that, and there was never a single trace of any of these women ever filing complaints. Ever. You know, it seemed like the Georgetown Police Department had an excuse for everything that happened. You know, they were unaware of his previous criminal histories and stuff, and, you know, all of that. And it's just numerous people coming to them stating, you know, this officer has done this to me. And it's like they just turned their back to it. And had they have done something about it at that time, this probably would have never happened. They handled it in a very poor manner. The second that we had a lawsuit against them, they were the first ones to be trying to settle it out of court to shut me up, so it didn't go public. Their concern was never what was in the best interest of me or what he did to me. It was getting me out of the news, getting me out of the district attorney's office, getting me out of a lawsuit attorney's office so that they could go on with their life and forget it ever happened.
You knew nothing about the Stacey Stites murder or any before this all happened, correct?
Before it happened, no. After it happened, I have actually done a fair share amount of research on the Stacey Stites murder. I'm actually even friends with one of her best friends now.
Mm-hmm. How have you reacted to learning about that case, and how has that affected you and sort of your perspective of the assault against you?
It scares me. It really scares me, and I've done my research on it. And besides, you know, even what happened to me, I really don't think that Rodney Reed's guilty. There's too much evidence that's pointing towards Jimmy Fennell. And I believe that had they have handled that the way that it properly should have been handled, he would have been off the streets a long time ago, and a lot of people's lives would have been different. Do you believe, based upon what he did to you, that he would be capable of killing his girlfriend, fiancé? Absolutely. I do. 120%. Based off of what Jimmy Fennell Jr. has done to me and the experience that I went through with him, I think that man is more than capable of murder and murdering Stacey Stites. I'm 100% positive that he's her murderer.
You're afraid of his release. Talk to me a little bit about that and how that's being handled and how you're dealing with it. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good.
I am scared for him to be released. Everybody sits here and says, you know, oh, well, he won't do it. Or there's no evidence pointing that he's responsible for any of these murders. Or, you know, so he'll be on strict supervision, and if he leaves the state, you'll be the first one to know, and all of this. And, you know, in the back of my head, all I can picture is a gun to my head and the last things he said to me. And I honestly feel that the people are dealing with a psychopath. I believe that. I mean, even at my own trial, he pleaded guilty on his own and didn't even show an ounce of emotion in the courtroom. Didn't bother him at all. And I am terrified that what he promised me he would do, if they release him, he will do it. and everybody says, well, there's no evidence pointing that he's responsible for Stacey Stites' murder, and he won't come after you and he won't do that. Okay, well, that true. But what if they're wrong? Do they need 2 dead women, 3 dead women before they put him away and realize what kind of monster he truly is? Do they need actual DNA on one of us while we're sitting in a morgue to connect him to it and put him away? I mean, if he did come and murder me, are they going to come and arrest my boyfriend because he had sex with me the day before and his semen's in me? Is that what, So, yeah, I'm a little scared. I'm a little scared at the fact that there is a man who wants me dead, and he told me that. And whether they believe it or not, our court systems, they didn't have to sit there with a gun to their head. I did. They just sit there and read what's in front of them on a piece of paper of what somebody else told them they think they know. They didn't have to go through that. I had to go through that. How do they know he's not a monster? How do they know he's not capable of doing things? Because he's smart about it? That means he's, I'm terrified. The way they handle things is just absolutely unreal. Like, what's going to happen to me when he gets out? Am I going to be a murder that's been unsolved for 16, 17 years while my boyfriend sits on death row? So yeah, I'm terrified. I think that he should have to serve his entire full sentence. I think that they should reopen the Rodney Reed case and at least let it be retrialed because there's only 2 ways that scenario is going to go. 1, they're going to prove that he's still guilty and life goes back to the way it was. Or 2, they're going to find out that they've had an innocent man in prison, put the right one there, and save who knows how many lives.